미국 남가주대 교수이며 한국학연구소 소장인 데이비드 강의 강연 시간입니다. 강찬웅이라는 한국 이름을 갖고 있는 그는 미국 유학생이었던 아버지와 미국인 어머니 사이에서 태어났는데요. 스탠퍼드 대학교에서 학사학위, 캘리포니아 대학교에서 정치학 박사학위, 버클리에서 인류학과 국제정치학을 취득해 국제정치는 물론이며 한반도의 전문가로 불리고 있습니다. 그는 여러 강의를 통해 대한민국의 저력을 알렸는데요. 그러면서도 안보와 북한 문제 같은 너무 딱딱한 분야만 다뤄서는 안 된다라며 한류 등으로 한국 대중문화에 대한 관심이 커진 것을 연구 분야에 적극적으로 반영하고 있다라며 강연에 힘을 더했습니다. 그가 말하는 한국은 어떤 나라인지 강연 함께 보시겠습니다.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. All of us do who are on this side, because you guys are taking out 2 weekends of your life, 2 free weekends to come here. So those of us who actually are studying Korea really find it rewarding that you guys would do this. So, huh? Exactly. So I hope that we can do enough to make it worth your while. So I have this very broad mandate from Mary to talk about, and so I first thought I would say hello, 안녕하세요. You've heard a lot about me, but I want to ask a question, which is why is Korea interesting? And I'm sure you've done this before, but why are you here? There's a number of reasons. I actually would have suspected mostly was because you have students, but then there are a whole bunch of substantive reasons, right? I mean, and the thing is, of course, every country is important, every region is interesting. So in some ways, the question is, why would you take some time out for Korea, right? And so what I'm going to do today is basically, does this? Okay, that works. Talk a little bit, just an overview, what is Korea anyway? What does it look like? How big is it? And then I'm going to talk about basically history, some pre-modern history, which I wrote about before, which makes a great Christmas. Oh, too late. Valentine's gift. Impress your, yeah, right. Anyway, right, but historical Korea, and then talk about the 20th century really quickly. And my goal is not to give you all the facts, but rather to give you a sense of the contours of what Korea has gone through up until today. Because clearly, even if we spent a whole week, I wouldn't be able to do all the details of Korea. But I want you guys to take away some of the things that I find most interesting about why Korea is something worth studying, right? So we'll start. Why should anybody care in the first place, right? Just in case you don't know where Korea is, you are here. Right? It's really small if you think about it, right? It's not in the center of anything. It's not in the center of Europe or in the center of Asia. It's way off on the side, way up north. But it is worth trying to figure out why it has been so geopolitically important. As I'm sure Mary told you earlier, Korea is interesting geographically, because there's a lot of things we say the most, the biggest, et cetera, in the world. But this is actually true. It's the only place in the world where the interests of the 4 major superpowers literally touch each other. And what I mean by that is, if you go to India or Iran or Iraq, USA is 10,000 miles away, Russia's 10,000, Here, Korea shares land borders with Russia and China. Its closest relation to Japan is 50 miles by ferry. And of course, as many of you know, the United States had at one time 100,000 troops and nuclear weapons on the peninsula. And now we have 30,000 troops. So the 4 biggest economies, the 4 biggest countries in the world are literally nose to nose on the Korean peninsula. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard this before. So here's China, Russia shares this border, here's Japan, the US is there. And we're going to take a minute, and I don't know if you guys have done this yet, but you know how Italy looks like a boot? What does Korea look like? If you sort of squint, what does it look like? Raise your hand. Don't shout it out. In the back. Yeah, a rabbit. Wow, you guys are good. Did you hear this before? You already heard this. No, did you? Okay, where is it, right? Korea looks like a bunny, right? Here's the ears. Here's the little nose. Here's some pause, and here's some pause, right? Now, the interesting thing is that this is sort of traditionally, when I was growing up, this is what we said. But what it's come to be known sort of in international relations is like looking like a bunny, not that macho, right? Not manly enough. So Koreans will now tell you that it looks like a tiger. However, and this may not be politically correct, but I submit to you that is not what you would think of. You know, I mean, you really have to squeeze the tiger to get it in there, right? I mean, I think it looks more like a bunny, frankly. But I will admit a tiger is more macho. So anyway, that's what Korea looks like. Now, how big is Korea? In general, as we know, we tend to think of China and Japan as huge, and Korea as really small. So one thing that we did, you can do, is you can take population and sort of landmass, the size in 1,000 square kilometers, and you put a bunch of Asian countries on there, and it looks sort of what you expect. Japan's big, 130 million people. Thailand, Philippines, South Korea, 45, 50 million people. Singapore is tiny, of course. It's a little city-state, about 4 million people. So yeah, right, there's some really big countries, there's some small countries. But in a way, that doesn't necessarily tell us that much about it. One of the interesting things we can do is what if we picked up Korea, if we picked it up and we put it in Europe? How big would it be? Because in general, we tend to think of European countries as big and a lot of these Asian countries as small. So we did the same thing, population and landmass. What's interesting about this chart? Just go ahead and look at it for a minute. Hand, anybody? Go ahead.
It's as big as the UK and so forth, but just from where it is on the plot, it's more densely populated than places like Spain and France.
Okay, sure, right? I mean, the first thing I would say is Japan is huge, right? With 130 million people, Japan is almost twice the population of Italy, France, UK. Japan is a huge country if we put it in Europe. And a unified Korea would be roughly the same size as all the European countries, 75, 80 million people, and a land mass roughly the same. It's not like UK, Germany, and Italy are over here and Korea's down there. I mean, Korea is a big country if you put it in Europe. It's actually not that small, because we're used to thinking of Germany and France and whatever as being big, right? The problem for Korea, and frankly for Japan, is that this is a false map, because this is really what East Asia looks like. That's Japan down there. That's Thailand. Korea's the 48, right? South Korea. China is huge. China is a continent-sized country. So of course, compared to China, everybody's small. It's the same way as the United States, right? We are a continent-sized country. Right? So European countries would all be clustered around there, and the US is here. But it's just to give you a sense of the scale, right? For most countries that aren't continent-sized, Korea is actually pretty normal-sized. It's not that small. Now, why also do we care? This is a chart, and